we'd like to welcome you here today to the NDX Education presentation with Sandy Balarjan. It is our practice management series, and this title is How to Conduct Effective Meetings That Produce Results. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Joanne Friedman, Territory Sales Manager, and Devin Gillespie, Territory Sales Manager. Both of them facilitate all of Canada. Take it away, team.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessica. So tonight, our speaker, Sandy, she's a leading authority on how to increase the effectiveness of dental business systems. Ms. Balarja is author of 3 textbooks, Dental Office Administration, first and second edition, published by Top Hat Publishers, and the Canadian Dental Office Administrator, published by Nielsen Canada. She created the first certificate course in dental practice management at the University of Toronto, Faculty of Dentistry. Sandy has lectured at dental facilities across North America and has had articles published in many journals, including the Journal of the Canadian Dental Association, Oral Health, Spectrum Teamwork, Just for Canadian Dentists, and many other publications. As owner-operator of Dental Office Consulting Services, Sandy specializes in dental practice management consulting, hiring, coaching and training dental teams, implementation of in-office programs, business and operational plans. Take it away, Sandy.
Thank you so much, Devin. Okay, welcome everyone. Tonight we're going to be talking about how to conduct effective team meetings that actually produce results. So as you know, it's important to have team meetings because they're a great way of creating accountability within your team and also facilitating team success. So tonight, what we're going to be talking about is providing you with the tools to make your team meetings much more effective and empower your teams to help perform the team functions and produce results according to what your business plan is. So at the end of the webinar, you should be able to identify the difference between a productive meeting and a chair warming session. I'm sure you've attended many of those. Create action plans that are time-bound and with built-in accountability, and I'll show you exactly how that can be accomplished tonight. And understand how to conduct a productive team meeting with positive results, and team communication, as you know, is a critical success factor. So your dental team is part of your social operating system, and your social operating system is critical to your ongoing success. It provides you with the consistent framework that's needed to create common ways of thinking and behaving. And it drives the culture of your organization. And in fact, it creates the culture of your organization, which is extremely important in order to create results, to have an effective culture where everyone is on the same page. So why do you have meetings in the first place? I know I've attended many meetings that are not productive at all. And you end up at the next meeting or the subsequent meeting to be talking about the same thing that you talked about at the last meeting. And that can be very discouraging, not only to your team members, but to you as a provider as well. So meetings are supposed to be empowering for your employees, and they're a forum for everyone to have their voices heard. This is an opportunity for them to communicate with you as the dentist, and sometimes they only happen once a month, sometimes they happen more frequently, sometimes they don't happen at all. But it's really important for everyone to be on the same page and working toward the same goals. They're a great way to communicate when a message needs to reach everyone at the same time. What I've found over the years is that oftentimes if somebody's either not at the meeting, or if there are no meetings, then what happens is that communication breaks down very quickly, and then it starts becoming a division often between the front and the back office. So, or in other words, the clinical and the admin side. So it's very important to have these meetings where everybody can talk about any obstacles that they're encountering, any problems that they're encountering, but at the same time, have them fully productive and create an action plan for each action item that you have discussed. And I'll show you exactly how to do that. Meetings develop workplace and leadership skills. So that's really important. And they can also be morale boosting and make employees feel that they're an important part of the organization. So that's a key point. You know, if you find that your morale is going downhill, you might want to hold a meeting and just determine what the cause is. And 9 times out of 10, I've found it's because of lack of communication. And every team meeting that I have conducted or I have facilitated, I found that that is always on the agenda every single time, is communication. So it's really important. You may think that communication is flowing and everybody knows what they're doing, but it's not often the case. So there's good news and there's bad news about having team meetings. Meetings provide an important ways for employees to communicate and within the organization and to get the work done. Also, they're an opportunity to come together, not just to have pizza, because every team meeting that I've attended, they always have pizza, but they're an opportunity to come together to determine what your goals are and plans on how to achieve those goals. So it's good to have goals, but if you don't have an action plan that's time bound, then it becomes a wish list. So it's really important to really define how you're going to accomplish those goals and who's going to be doing it. And that's where you build in accountability. These are critical tools for managing change. And as you know, in dentistry, change is the only one thing that you can count on, because change occurs all the time. There's changes in technology, changes in techniques. There's changes in pretty much everything. Protocols, for example, we've just gone through the COVID protocols. So change occurs all the time. It's the only thing that is a constant, is change. So, but I find that a lot of people, a lot of teams are resistant to change because they're comfortable in the way that they were doing things before. So they don't necessarily want to move on and move out of their comfort zone. The bad news about meetings is that often they will lose focus, or they may not have focus, and they don't achieve any results. When this type of thing happens, what happens is that the employees that are attending the meeting become demotivated. They don't want to participate because I've heard from staff members, and they'll say things like, I don't know, I listened to this and nothing ever changes, so why bother? And that's really important thing to note, because if somebody's not participating, they're not engaged, and they're not, they don't care about what it is that you're talking about. So it's important to maintain focus and to really hone in on objectives of why you're having that meeting, what you want to achieve. Some offices have too many meetings that accomplish very, very little. The key is to have fewer meetings, but make them effective meetings. I think I've told this story before, so if I have, please forgive me, but I was at an office consulting one time where the doctor would have team meetings every 2 weeks. And as soon as I came into the office, the team were asking me, oh, can you please speak to the doctor so we can only have team meetings once a month? You know, every 2 weeks is too close together. And I'm looking at the lack of production during that time. So I spoke to the doctor, and he said, that's one thing I'm not negotiable on, because he said at each team meeting, we set 3 goals for the next meeting. And he said, by the next meeting, if those 3 goals are accomplished, they get a surprise of some kind. So it could be a bonus, it could be something monetary or something non-monetary, it could be something as simple as a sushi lunch or something like that, but they get a surprise. And that office, they really scrambled. The meetings were on Thursdays, and they scrambled on Wednesdays to make sure that those 3 goals were done. So he was moving ahead with his goals, and by having them set their goals for the next 2 weeks, and they always got done. Meeting time is often wasted when attendees arrive late for meetings, or unprepared, or simply don't participate or contribute. I've been to many meetings where there are certain team members that will just sit there and warm the chair. That's why I mentioned the chair warming. And they will not participate, they won't speak up, and yet oftentimes they have a lot to say. You know, if you can draw them out and get them to participate and talk about different things, then they usually have a lot to say. It's important to focus on creating value for your patients. That's really the number one reason that you're in business, and that you maintain your business. So your team needs to be prepared for total quality in every area of your business, and focused on things like how can we improve the quality of, how can we improve the patient intake process? How can we improve the insurance adjudication process? So anything like that that can improve the services will set you far and ahead of your competition. How can we improve our customer service, for example? So what creates real and perceived value for patients is really what you want to think about and focus on. Successful businesses must be flexible, and they must be able to react quickly to change. And as I mentioned, so many things have changed in dentistry. There's a lot of corporate dentistry, corporate dental offices around now. In the US, as you know, there are a lot of DSOs that are have multiple practices. So when you think about how to compete, I really wouldn't even concentrate on competing. I'll tell you, I held a marketing seminar at one point, and I was going through how to think about your competition and that type of thing. And one gentleman said in the seminar, and I thought it was brilliant, he said, isn't it more important to concentrate on what we're doing rather than concentrate on what they are doing? And I thought that's absolutely perfectly correct, because if you focus on your own customer service and maintaining your own loyal patient base, then you shouldn't have to worry about your competition. But it's always good to be aware of, if a competition is moving right next door, then that might be something that you want to consider talking about at a meeting. It's always important to do continuous evaluation and try to improve your services in any way that you can to help your patients. So constant reevaluation of every aspect of your business to find ways to make it better becomes part of your business culture. So if you always find ways that you can improve your business, then it helps to improve your business culture as a whole. Meetings provide an opportunity to talk to your employees and to get input on how your services and productivity can improve. So oftentimes when you ask your employees questions, they have a lot more answers because they're in contact with the patients at the front desk, for example, and they can hear the concerns of patients. They find out what concerns them the most, or why they're not keeping scheduled appointments and things like that. So these are things that you can talk about as a team and solve some problems and put in new solutions, put in new strategies on how to make things better. When you build a strong culture that is non-threatening, that is consistent and supportive of each of your team members, it provides employees with job satisfaction and stability in their role as well. And that's really important right now because of the fact that there is a shortage of staff everywhere. I know that you are already aware of this, but also you don't want someone leaving your practice because they're unhappy. You want, if they're moving away, that's a different story, but you'd like to have long-term staff members that are happy at their jobs and that they improve the culture, and by their presence and their contributions to your practice, they help to improve the overall. It's very important to embrace and implement change, and as I mentioned, you know, there's lots of competition. There's lots of dental offices around you. I've mentioned many times how many dental offices are within a 2-kilometer radius of me and where I live, and it's phenomenal, you know, within 2 kilometers, which is 1 point something miles. I know it's 1.6 kilometers to a mile. So so changes in the marketplace, of course, are inevitable. They are changing. You must be ready to embrace change and be responsive to market trends. Nowadays, with inflation, you're going to find that that there are even more changes. Companies will be looking at their dental benefits. They may be cutting back on benefits. So it's even more important to, at this point, to be communicating the value of the services to your patients, so they will choose to have their dental work done and their dental treatment done. So so that's really an important way that you can talk to your team to determine how to talk to patients and about their dental benefits and the cutbacks in dental benefits if that's occurring. it's important that you can achieve success without learning from failures along the way. However, if you fail now and then, that's really a great way of learning how to get something fixed. So give your employees opportunities to try new things and to experiment with change. I might have mentioned this in the past, but I was teaching appointment scheduling to a group of dental people and at an office. And one of the ladies, and the whole point of what I was teaching was how to avoid no-shows and short notice cancellations. And it's all about verbiage and how you set that appointment in the first place. So one of the ladies said, you know, I haven't said that I've been working here 23 years and I've never talked like that. I've never said that to a patient. And so I said, then tell me, in the 23 years, do you still get cancellations and no-shows? So if you don't try something, I can guarantee it won't work. But if you try it, just give it a try. And I always encourage them to give me the feedback. If you find that this isn't working for you, try to use your own natural language. But the point is getting certain specific points across to your patient, then that's absolutely fine. So being flexible with communications is important. Give your employees the opportunity to try them and then get their feedback and see how they feel about it. Start now to accept and use change to your advantage. So some changes can be awkward, but some changes are so valuable. I will tell you, I was on the very first committee ever to talk about and create EDI, so electronic data interchange, as you know. And at that time, insurance companies were bucking against it. They did not want the availability of electronic data interchange. And the reason for it was because they thought it would lead to a lot of overuse or overutilization of dental plans. So that was a big change for not only for dental offices, but for insurance companies. And that change made things better, made it easier for the administrative team to send through claims. And it was much more expedient as well. So meetings don't necessarily have to be boring, although some are, but they are the lifeblood of highly effective teams. So it's important to keep them stimulated and to be productive. Individual efforts are brought together and they're coordinated in a collective effort. That's the whole point of having a meeting. And we're going to talk about the different types of meetings in just a few minutes as well. So regularly scheduled staff meetings provide an opportunity to review the office philosophy, for example, redefine your goals, decide the process to achieve the goals, to share any ideas that might enhance the growth of the practice. And I'm going to add to that as well, to also talk about the obstacles that are in place. So for example, if your office is insurance dependent and one of the large companies near you is suffering from the inflation that's occurring and the rising costs of pretty much everything, then they might be cutting back on their dental benefits. So it's important to talk about that with your team, and let's come up with some ideas on how to communicate with patients, how to help your patients still follow through with their dental treatment. So it's important to talk about obstacles like that and to solve problems. I mean, there's so many uses for teams, but for team meetings rather, but the most important thing is to create a time-bound action plan. I'm going to probably repeat that a few times as we go through this webinar tonight. So staff meetings provide an opportunity to resolve any issues that might be happening, which can grow into conflicts. I always say, you know, the best way to make a mountain out of a molehill is to throw a little dirt on it. But if you have something that is an underlying problem that is festering, don't let it fester. Get it out in the open. Talk about it openly as a team in a non-threatening environment. That's really important. So your team needs to feel comfortable. They need to feel that they can trust one another, that they can bring up possible solutions to the problem without criticism or being put down for anything. So it's very important that your meeting time is very open and honest and welcoming to new ideas and opinions. It's much easier to resolve those smaller issues when they're still small. When they become big, then it becomes a bigger problem. So staff meetings are also an opportunity to be creative and to actively problem solve by encouraging new ideas. I often tell offices, talk to your team members or at your team meeting. Let's talk about who our ideal patient is. Let's talk about some marketing ideas. And should we get involved with social media, which the answer would be yes. But you have to control social media. You have to make sure that your messaging is positive and that you might want to get a professional help with that. So there's lots of things that you can talk about and get some really, really good ideas from your team members. So I always start by, when we start with team meetings at a client's office, when I'm working with them, we start by laying down the foundation. So we kind of make some ground rules. One is, why are we meeting and what do we want to accomplish? So that's really the basis of your meeting. You want to accomplish something at every meeting, otherwise it is just not productive. The answer to these questions will define your purpose. So without a clear purpose, the meeting's participants may think it's unnecessary and will lose focus. They may be more interested in checking their phone. I've seen this happen so many times at meetings where they're texting. I don't know who they're texting, but anyway, they're texting or they're not paying attention, and it's really not of value. It's very important when you are having a meeting that one of the ground rules also would be ask people to put their phones away or to turn their phones off during the meeting and not to be looking at their phones. If you have an outside speaker come in, it's also really distracting for the speaker. So it's very difficult to get through what they need to get through as well. And you'll find if they are distracted with their telephone that they're not listening to anyone else that's speaking as well. Could be another team member that's speaking. So without a clear purpose, you can kiss the usefulness of your meeting goodbye. So you really need to know why you're meeting, what's the purpose of your meeting, and how to make it much more productive. It's always important to communicate any news that you need to share with your team, and sharing information is important, but not necessarily the only purpose for a meeting. So it's not just to share. It can be for learning experience. For example, if you're taking infection control or WMIS training or health and safety training, that kind of thing. So it's important to have a purpose for your meeting. So a working meeting that results in a clear action plan, that's the most important thing, is productive and it's respectful of everyone's time. So what I do with meetings, I'm going to show you a method that I use. It's called a right to share meeting. And what we do at every right to share meeting is we will go through each topic on the agenda. And with each topic, we don't stop talking about it unless it's we're stuck on an issue, and then goes into issues parking lot, which I'm going to talk about in a minute as well. But we have an action item for every single thing. And then we assign who's going to take care of that action item and by when. So that's what I mean by a time-bound action plan. If you go work through your agenda and you attach an action item to each and every agenda item, you will produce results. You will get the results that you're looking for at your meeting. Some factors that can lead to meeting disasters, if having a poor facilitator or none at all. So in other words, nobody is guiding and directing that meeting, and that's really important. It's very important to have somebody who can direct people, who can refocus people when people get off track, and this happens every single time. So the facilitator needs to bring people back to what you're talking about. If you get sidetracked, every team meeting that I attend, I find that the staff members will say, remember when Mrs. Smith came in and this happened and that happened. Well, the other team members might not have been involved in that, so they have no idea what that person is talking about. And including me, I certainly wouldn't have any idea what they're talking about. So it's important that everyone is part of this. So you can talk about what the situation was, how it was resolved or how it should have been resolved. And that's what a facilitator will do, is bring everybody back into focus and not have too many sidetracked conversations going on. Purpose of a facilitator is to guide the meeting and to maintain the focus of the meeting. Facilitator must monitor when the group gets off track and brings them back to the agenda. That's a key item. If it's something very important, then is there an action item we can attach to this? If so, then attach the action item and then come back to the agenda. But that's what a facilitator does. The way I do right to share meetings is I will change the facilitator at each and every meeting, if possible. So I'll have a team member pick. The facilitator gets to pick the next facilitator for the meeting, and so they basically write the topics on the giant Post-it note or the board, the meeting board, and then facilitate the meeting. So I'll show you how that works. It's very important that your meetings start on time and that they finish on time. Starting late sends a message that it's okay to waste people's time. I was working with an office one time where at the morning huddle, every morning when they had a morning huddle, and by the way, I call it a daily huddle meeting, so you don't necessarily have to have it first thing in the morning. You can have it right after lunch, and talk about how yesterday's plan went, how today's schedule should go, and if there are any openings for tomorrow, and so on and so forth. So you can talk about those three things anytime during the day, because I often get the feedback that, well, everybody starts at different times. So that's why, and attached in your handout tonight is the daily huddle process. So I explain step by step how to do a daily huddle and what things you need to focus on, and it's a series of questions. So hopefully that will help you to guide your daily huddle. So starting late says that it's okay to waste people's time. And it's very important that this is pointed out to whoever is coming late to the meeting. I mean, if they were stuck in traffic, that's a different story if they're coming in specifically for the meeting. But if it's regularly they're starting late, or the office that I was just mentioning, which I never finished that part of it, but they had one employee who would, at the morning huddle, every morning bring in her breakfast. Well, this isn't time to have your breakfast. You need to have your breakfast before you start work, and not sit and eat your breakfast during the meeting, because you're not participating in the meeting. So it's really important that everybody comes to the meeting prepared, they come on time, and they're ready to start the meeting. It's actually rude, and it's rude behavior, and it's a very bad habit. Participants expect to start on time and to finish on time, and that adds more credibility to your meeting. So that's an important thing. If there are items that cannot be addressed at your meeting, then park them. So in other words, in the meetings that I have, we draw a big green circle with a big P in it. So it's our green P parking lot. And put the issues into an issue parking lot, and it will be discussed. It will be part of the agenda for the next meeting. Oftentimes what I've found in meetings is that by the time that issue has been parked and we go on to the next meeting, that issue is often resolved already. So the green P parking lot is a very useful tool. It doesn't have to be green. It's anyway, your parking lot. If a meeting runs too long, it becomes of no value. It has very little value. A meeting that has no stated ending time is an invitation for nonstop monologues, for one thing, that turn out to be tests of endurance. And it really you'll find that if somebody is talking too long and there's only one person that's hijacking, I call it, the meeting, or taking over the meeting, then and they don't stop talking, then you'll find that the other team members have checked out. They're checking their phones, they're checking their email or doing whatever. So it's really important to try to make it as useful and move the meeting along as much as possible. Rehashing old issues. This is a really good indicator that your meeting was not productive if you're talking about the same thing over and over and over again. It means that an action item hasn't been attached to it, that accountability hasn't been built in. So these issues might come up because decisions weren't documented and accountability wasn't assigned. So you didn't assign who's going to be doing this activity and what the activity is. Often people can show up and offer their opinions on subjects that are not relevant to any of their business. So they might have an issue that they're concerned about that doesn't affect anyone else, And those things should be taken offline. So in other words, just tell the person that we will discuss this privately, or we'll discuss this offline. And if it's not relevant to the rest of the team. Rehashing is like watching a replay of a bad movie, and it can kill the meeting, and that's for sure. Oftentimes what I'll find as well is if you're rehashing old issues, I'll have feedback from staff members who will say to me, no, I don't bother contributing because, nothing ever changes. We talk about the same thing at every meeting and nothing ever changes. So that means to me that there hasn't been an action item and accountability built in to that agenda item. So it's important to keep your employees engaged and keep them interested and participating. That's really the key thing. A meeting may be appear to get things done, but if no follow-up is done to check on what's been done with assignments and decisions, then no progress has been made. So it's very important that that you follow up on all of the action items that you've decided on. Your meeting becomes meaningless unless it has a time-bound action plan with clear accountability. In other words, who's going to do what and when, and by when. That's the key. This is an example of what a time-bound action plan might look like. I realize I've only put a couple of items on here, but the objective at this office is to increase the production. So how are we going to do it? We're going to contact all patients who have an unscheduled treatment plan. Who's going to do it and by when? So I put myself in by July the 15th. I'll have contacted all of the unscheduled treatment plans to follow up with them. By the way, that works beautifully at offices. All the offices that I have worked with, I've gone in and there have been a lot of unscheduled treatment plans, but if I assign one person to follow up with these people and to contact these people, you'd be amazed at how that schedule fills up. It's phenomenal, actually. Complete inventory of stockroom. Well, Joan's going to do that by July the 1st, and it would go on, so on and so forth. So at your next staff meeting, the first thing that you're going to do is go through your action plan from your last meeting and say, okay, Sandy, did you get all the treatment plans, or what's the status of the contacting the people with outstanding treatment plans? And I would say what the status is, or what point I'm at, and then we could either take it off of the list as being completed, or we could leave it on the agenda as not being completed yet. Same with any of the action items on your list. So another thing that can derail a meeting is that one or two dominant people will kind of take over, and they keep talking about what is of interest to them or what's important to them. And what that does is it kind of excludes all of the other people. So then the other people check out. When I say check out, I mean mentally, they're not there anymore. They're not engaged in what you're talking about. So it's important to make sure that the facilitator brings people back to the agenda and gets everyone to contribute. Others can barely get in a word and walk away feeling that the contributions won't matter anyway. So I remember attending many meetings at the one of the University of Toronto when I was working there. I know there was one lady who always constantly derailed the meetings, and she was very vocal and very loud. She had lots to say. It was all good things that she was saying, but it didn't allow for other people to get their 2 cents in, or to pass their opinions along about anything, or their contributions. Participants will lose focus because of tangents, and you must have a clear agenda, and the facilitator must bring the entire group back to what you're discussing in the first place, and to attach action items. Constant chatter, this is really, it's quite irritating at a meeting when people are chattering in the background. So the facilitator, once again, would have to bring them back and just stop. Ask the people, if you want to, if the people that are chattering or talking during this, then it's very important to bring them back. And why this is important is because you want their voices to be heard. This is your opportunity to have your voice heard. If there are people that are chattering and talking on the sidelines, then you will not get the important points covered, and you won't hear their voices either, because they're talking between themselves. They could be talking about something totally unrelated to what the meeting agenda item is. So constant whispering and having side conversations is very annoying to everyone else. So it's very important. It's also very unprofessional, and it doesn't contribute to the meeting. And then you've wasted your meeting time by listening to, or by not listening to the facilitator, because of the fact that you have to listen to this chatter. It's very distracting. So here's some ground rules that I usually set for a meeting, and everyone comes with an opinion. And their opinion is important. Everybody has a voice. This is your opportunity to have a voice about your place of employment. Opinions probably and most likely always will vary. I remember one of the first offices that I worked in, we had a number of ladies, and we were a very cohesive team. We all worked together very, very well, but we all had different opinions. But the key is that we respected each other's opinions, and we allowed our voices to be heard, and we never downgraded or said anything about anyone's opinion. Everyone's opinion is of value. Decisions will be made by consensus, and good luck with that one. It's very difficult to get consensus if you have multiple employees in your office. So that's why I say if possible. So it's either consensus or compromise. Now, what is a compromise? A compromise is where maybe the parties aren't 100% happy on either side, but they're 90% happy in the middle. So it's very important to be open-minded and to be able to compromise on certain issues, and to make decisions to move the practice forward. Everyone shares their opinions in a non-threatening environment. One decision will be accepted, depending on what it is. You may still like your opinion, and that's absolutely fine, but you're willing to commit to and support the accepted one. So if the majority accepts a specific opinion, then give it a try. If it works, then it's great. If it doesn't work, then discuss it at your next meeting and try to resolve it. The other ground rule is that everyone must participate. That's why the type of meeting that I conduct, the right to share meeting, it forces people to participate, not by brute force or anything, but it allows them an opportunity to put one topic of what they're going to be talking about. So one agenda item on the agenda. Now, the reason that this works so well is because of the fact that I've been attending many meetings, and then we'll thrash out as many issues as we possibly can, set some accountability, and then I'll leave the meeting and say, oh, I forgot to talk about this thing. Or in the way that I do it, I will ask each person to say one word of a topic that they want to discuss, and then we'll put their initials next to it. So that's their topic, and they can bring up what they want to talk about. But that helps to bring everybody out, and it helps everyone to participate and be engaged in the topics that they're talking about. So it's very important that everyone participates, that nobody just sits there and isn't paying attention. It's very important that this is your opportunity, your team's opportunity to talk about the issues that affect them on a daily basis. If you bring a problem, bring a proposed solution. We've done this at the office meetings that I've held in the past. I would often ask them to bring more than one solution, more than one possible solution. And it doesn't matter if it sounds crazy or outrageous. Let's talk about it, because you might have come up with something brilliant. So it's important to try to bring, don't just bring all the problems, bring some possible solutions as well. And that way they're more engaged, and they're more welcoming of the solution that you've talked about. Celebrate new ideas. Like, that's a great idea, Diane. I think that was fantastic. Thank you for bringing it to the meeting. So it's really important that you celebrate people's ideas, and that way it encourages everybody to bring up more new ideas to the next meeting. Everyone needs to believe that change is positive. I work with a lot of offices, and if they are not willing to change, and this generally comes from the top, if the doctor isn't willing to make the changes necessary, then the staff kind of pick up on that. But some staff members will be resistant of change entirely, and the reason for that is because it's out of their comfort zone. Well, the best growth comes out of moving from your comfort zone. So that's a key thing to remember. If you move a little bit out of your comfort zone, you can get a much better result and much happier team members. Every team member must participate in some way, even if it's to share a compliment that they received from a patient or something positive she or he feels about the practice in a non-threatening format. I worked, years ago, I worked with a prosthodontist. I was managing his practice, and we had our daily huddles. We had them in the morning at that practice, and he had some ground rules there that everyone had to come to the huddle. You had to be on time. You had to be prepared. And it was always a great, everybody wanted to be there, by the way, at the huddle, and wanted to be there on time, because we always had something positive going on. We would go through the day. We would go through what happened yesterday. What's the schedule look like today? Do we have any special needs for people? Do we have, where should we put emergencies if they have emergencies, and so on and so forth. So we go through all the regular things, and then at the end of the meeting, somebody always had to either tell a joke or to say something inspirational, talk about a good movie. We always said something more social but positively focused, and give each other a high five and go team, you know, at the beginning of the day. It was absolutely fantastic. I'm going to tell you another little quick story, and that is when my husband and I went to a restaurant one time after I did a course, and we went to, anyway, when we went to the restaurant, the server came over, and he's taking our order, and then he left, and we all of a sudden heard this clapping and cheering and just general laughter going on in the kitchen. And so when he came back, I said, is it somebody's birthday? And he said, no, that's our shift change. That's our meeting, every shift change. So someone had to say something inspirational or tell a joke or something motivational, and it was his turn that day. So obviously it went over very well. But when you start your day off on a positive note, it makes your day flow so much better, and it really gets the team working together. Everyone must be committed to the process and agree that to support the opinions of others. Personal attacks and bickering should not be tolerated. That's a key thing as well. Issues and actions are to be discussed and agreed upon at each meeting and discussed as a team. And generally what I ask the team to do after the meeting is over is not to talk about what was discussed at the team. And I do this for a valid, specific reason, because if you've ever heard of the telephone game, the broken telephone game, you'll find that if somebody doesn't speak up at the meeting and then they relay certain information that was discussed at the meeting to another coworker who might not have been there, so they didn't get all of the information, then it starts the broken telephone chain. So in other words, they may have interpreted differently, or they may pass on the information to the other employee who interprets it totally differently. And so it's very important to discuss your issues openly as a team at the meeting, and then stop the discussion. If there's something that you want to talk about at the next meeting, put it on the agenda for the next meeting. I usually put a big giant Post-it note on you know, one of the walls in the kitchen or the staff room, and I just put, you know, topics for next meeting. And I find that throughout the week or the month, that the staff are adding all the topics as they arise, and that makes for a much better meeting. When the meeting is concluded, further discussion will cease between staff members because of the broken telephone. If the issue remains unresolved, it will be tabled and reviewed again at the next meeting. It's important that everyone agrees to stay on track. One team member will be assigned to keep the group focused. So if you have several team members, then you can have one person say, not necessarily the facilitator, but the facilitator can often do this as well. But one person will keep the entire team focused on what we're talking about. It's important that everyone participates at the meeting. It's not of any value if somebody sits there and doesn't say anything, and it doesn't make for a productive meeting. So people need to show up to meetings prepared with things to talk about, and to contribute their ideas and their topics to be discussed, and to gain insights at the meeting. It's important to hand out any pre-work or hand out the agenda if you can in advance of the meeting, so everybody knows what the purpose of your meeting is, and that you're going to be talking about these particular subjects at the meeting. Another thing that can cause problems at meetings if you're covering issues that are irrelevant to many attendees. I have found this, I've had this happen many times. So some meetings can make no sense, or they get into issues that are relevant to one or two people, but not the rest of the team. And what happens is the rest of the team will start checking out. So then now they're not listening anymore. They're looking toward where their phone is, see if they can check quietly, you know, what their text messages are on the phone. So it's very important to, if you are covering an issue that's going to take some time, put it in the parking lot if it's not relevant to everyone at the meeting. So try to include everybody and try to talk about everyone's issues at your meeting. Everyone sits on the sidelines wondering why everyone's time is being wasted. And I've heard this over and over and over again. And it's very important that you don't waste people's times, that you actually accomplish things at your meetings. That's the whole purpose of tonight's webinar. Listening to such discussions often makes other team members feel awkward. That's the other thing too. And it can make them uncomfortable, and it can make them just not interested anymore in participating. So a good meeting will have 3 stages. One is organizing the organization of the meeting. So that helps to define the purpose of the meeting. Why are you having this meeting? Is it your regular monthly meeting? What are you going to talk about? I'm going to add something here as well. One thing that staff members generally don't want to talk about, and I know that different consultants may tell you different things, but in general, your team members don't necessarily want to talk about your stats. And I've had this feedback over and over and over again from different team members. They care about their job and how it relates to the success of the practice, of course. However, they don't necessarily want to see how your production is being affected or how your stats are. And I know there are some consultants that do believe in management by statistics. I certainly am a numbers person, and I believe that you have to watch your numbers, but your staff aren't that interested. They're interested in the day-to-day problems that are happening, or the day-to-day motivations that that can occur. So I would avoid talking about the stats, because it also can sometimes, not always, but it can sometimes lead to resentment of some team members, where they think, oh yeah, well, you know, we're making all this money for the doctor, but you know, I haven't had a raise in 2 years. So you have to be very, very careful when you're looking at things like that. So define the purpose of your meeting, invite the appropriate people, write and distribute the agenda to the participants. Make advanced preparations, make sure that you have your meeting room ready, you've got your lunch ordered. I always really advise you to make sure that lunch has been eaten by the time the meeting is starting, because if they're eating, then they're, you know, looking for drinks and things like that. There's too much hubbub when they're eating. So give them the first 10 minutes to eat, and then get started when they're finished their lunch. The meeting itself, encourage participation, of course. Try to maintain focus as much as possible. Encourage candor. That's really important, and constructive debate. So when people can speak openly, that's really important, and that they feel that they're in a non-threatening environment, and that they can share their opinion. That's a key thing. Create action plans with timelines and accountability, and make it enjoyable. You know, make it as fun as you possibly can. And stage 3 is probably the most important thing, is the post-meeting work. That is following through on the agreements that were made. So this is where your action plan is, and the action items, and who's accountable for them, and when it will be done by. And that's the first thing that you're going to go through at your next meeting to see how much success you've had in that action plan at the last meeting, from the last meeting. Participants must perform time-bound action plans. So you have to say when is this going to be accomplished? By what date? And that's really a key thing. So that they've agreed on. Communication with other interested parties who did not attend the meeting should occur as soon as possible. And I would encourage team members who weren't at the meeting to read the minutes from the meeting. So it's also very important to take minutes at the meeting. And that's, you don't have to write full sentences. It can be bullet points that you discussed. But if you have an office manager at your office and somebody wasn't at the meeting, I would suggest that your office manager sits with that person and goes through what was discussed at the meeting, discussed and agreed upon, and the action items at the meeting. So prepare and distribute the minutes from the meeting as well. So it's important to take the minutes because the minutes are a written record of your meeting. Something that I've talked about before in past webinars, if you attended the Occupational Health and Safety for Dental Offices webinar, it's very important to have a component in your minutes, in your written minutes, to talk about health and safety at every meeting. That's a really important thing as part of your health and safety program. So just keep that in mind. You need minutes to remind you of what was discussed, better than relying on memory. And also, if you had an occupational health and safety inspector come into your office, then they're going to look for those minutes. They're going to see if you're actually discussing your occupational health and safety and if you're following up with it. So the structure of the minutes should flow around, of course, the agenda for the meeting. So it doesn't have to, it can be in bullet point forms, just get to the main points. You don't necessarily have to write out full sentences and that kind of thing. Cover the main topics, of course, that's the purpose of your meeting. Note any decisions made and agreements that were reached and when the time frame for those to be completed and who is responsible for the completion of those action items. Describe the action items that were given and to whom and when they are able to be done. Discuss any issues that are in the works for the next meeting. So at the next meeting, this is what we're going to be discussing. And so that allows the employee the time to think about what they want, how they want to contribute. So the facilitator will guide, as I mentioned earlier, guide the flow of the meeting by helping the group work through the agenda and to keep people focused and on track. It's kind of fun to change the facilitator at each meeting. I will tell you, when I talk about the right to share format, the way I do it is I have a new facilitator at each meeting, and the facilitator at today's meeting gets to pick the facilitator for the next meeting, and it makes it kind of fun. And that way it engages everyone, and everybody has the chance to be the facilitator, to be the one who's in control of the meeting. And that kind of forces people to participate as well. Everybody has an opportunity to facilitate the meeting, and presenters appear as needed to present specific reports, findings, or share their expertise. So say, for example, and this is a great way of getting the bang out of your buck for continuing education. If you have attended a meeting with one of your team members or all of your team members, have someone present on what you've learned at that meeting. So just give you an example. Let's say you attended a meeting for Invisalign and you took one or two people to this Invisalign meeting, then have them present at your staff meeting what they learned at that meeting. The same is true when the doctors go to meetings. I have had feedback from staff members who have said to me, you know, the doctor comes back and he or she is all charged up the day that they come back from this meeting. And then we get to the day-to-day, you know, and then it kind of goes by the wayside. And we have no idea what that person learned, what the doctor learned. So present what you learned at your clinical meetings or any of the meetings that you've attended that may be of value to your team. And that will help for implementation as well. So you will get those things implemented because your team is getting as excited about that, what you've learned, as you are. Sometimes a team member may be the presenter, or sometimes your presenter might come from the outside of the office. Make sure that he or she knows what to talk about and for how long, and allow time for questions. So for example, this could be a lunch and learn format, or it could be a presenter like myself. If I'm coming in to teach your office something new, then I'd be prepared for what I'm about to talk about, and I would set the agenda and also recap things at the end. So setting the agenda is the written plan that guides the flow of the meeting, which we've already talked about. But without a written agenda, then it's very hard to stay focused on what it is and trying to get something done, trying to get action items attached to each of those items that you've discussed. The meeting has no path to follow, so it becomes vulnerable to participants raising issues that you hadn't planned on addressing. So it can be an underlying issue that's with one employee, for example, that they're upset about. I will tell you, I was at a meeting recently where we were going through the points of an employee policies manual, and there was one employee who was flipping through the pages quickly, and she was getting really red in the face, and you could tell that she was angry about something. It turns out it was an unrelated issue, but her behavior was being observed by the office manager and the doctor at the time. So, it's things like that. If there's something that, if you have a specific agenda, it will generally keep things on track. But in this case, it was just sort of walking them through this. And, but it was very evident that this person did not want to participate. So it's kind of like building a house without blueprints. Well-defined agenda will developing a meaningful agenda takes planning, of course. Conducting a meeting with a well-organized agenda pays off and increases the likelihood for a focused and productive meeting. So the process helps to define how the work group is going to work through this, and the problem-solving process answers the what, the how, and the who. I will tell you, I worked with a lady who's assistant dean of a specific college, and she had the best process. We had to award a certain number of scholarships. And just the way she approached the entire meeting, she set the agenda. We had to go through, I know it's a couple hundred letters. It was a lot of letters. There's so many people on this committee. And by the time we had in 2 hours, we had all of those scholarships awarded to specific deserving, very well-deserving students. And so it's very important that you have a process and a plan, and you stick to the plan. And by the way, her background before becoming assistant dean was a project manager. So she had the process down pat. So how you're going to work through it is really important as well. So the right to share format, this is the format that I use. It encourages flexible dialogue, provides participants with an opportunity to have and present their issue or ask any questions. Participants will share in the facilitation duties, as I mentioned, so we can share the chair, that's what I call it as well. Everyone must play a role, which is really the key thing. So here's how it works. One person is selected as the facilitator, and at the end of the meeting, the facilitator will select the next facilitator for the next month. Each team member will be asked to state one word of a topic, and we go in a circle, that they wish to discuss at the meeting. We put the topic on there and their initials next to it. If they can't think of anything at that particular time, they say pass, and then we'll go through and we do that a couple of times until everyone says pass, and then the facilitator gets to pick the first topic and open the meeting. This works really well because it encourages everybody to participate, and oftentimes it will make sure that everything is covered because, as I said earlier, sometimes you'll be in a meeting and say, oh, I forgot to bring this up. This helps to draw everything out and everybody's ideas out. The facilitator writes the word on the flip chart and then opens the meeting when there are no further topics to be discussed. So the facilitator selects the first topic of discussion. As each topic is discussed, an action item is assigned to it, or it's put in the issues parking lot. So here's a sample agenda. How can we increase revenue, decrease our expenses? How can we reduce no-shows and short notice cancellations? And so on and so forth. It can be anything that is important to your team members. Then at the end of your meeting, here's a possible checklist for an effective meeting. Check to see that the meeting started and ended on time. Members are actively and constructively participated. The meeting has had a defined and useful purpose. The agenda was prepared and distributed in advance. Members were prepared to start and set their own action items. Everyone had stayed focused on the agenda, and the meeting accomplished results. That's the key thing. And minutes were produced and published. As I mentioned earlier, if issues cannot be discussed or they can't be completed, an action item can't be assigned to it, then put it in the issues parking lot and it will be discussed at the next meeting. So that will stay on the agenda for the next meeting. You may be wondering what happens if differences of opinion arise, and that often happens. Systematically problem solve with the team. When discussions become heated due to differences of opinion, move the team into problem solving mode or park the issue. That's really the key thing until they cool down. If they're the facilitator and they're participating at the same time, and it is easy to be done, it can be a little bit of a balancing act, but it's really not that difficult to do. They just write their agenda item on the agenda and then bring it up to the team. So the meeting facilitator must be neutral. That's a key thing as well. They can't be emotionally involved in a subject and in order to manage the process. As I mentioned earlier, delegate the facilitation to others. If you're bringing an outside facilitator, it can also be helpful at special meetings. You know, if you want to learn a specific skill or a lunch and learn, a product, anything like that. Make sure you spend time planning and the outside facilitator so that the outside facilitator knows your objectives and for your meeting are well known in advance. There are different types of meetings, but I want to kind of skip through this. You can do a year in review meeting, a checkpoint appraisal meeting, and the daily huddle meeting. And I think that is probably one of the most important meetings that you can have. This is a very powerful meeting. It takes very little time. And this is the handout that I've included with tonight's presentation. So to be prepared for the day physically and mentally, that's most important to ensure that all your lab results have been received, all your lab work has been received rather, to determine where to put emergencies. If you have a very busy day, you want to know where you can fit in an emergency if you have one. Identify new patients so the treatment coordinator can be ready to welcome that new patient, or anyone can be ready to welcome a new patient into the practice. Personalize the schedule and identify any patients with special needs or special disabilities. Provide any feedback from the previous day, discuss any problems that occurred, or discuss happy events, or like at the office that I worked in, tell a joke, make general announcements. Promote communication and lift the morale to all staff. So this is where you give each other a high five and go team, and we're ready for the day. Identify any post-operative comfort calls that need to be made by the clinical or business assistant. Identify any medical alerts that you need to be aware of. Identify any open items, if any, that have not been discussed. Discuss any positive feedback from patients and set a positive tone for the day. That's really the most important thing. The other thing that you will see on your handout is I've also included a list of who has outstanding treatment, who's coming in today, who has outstanding treatment, and who's going to speak to them. So that's a key thing that I've included on your handout. So in summary, team meetings are critical components of your social operating system. Dental teams need to have strong team players who perform well, and teams who communicate well and work together well toward common goals will produce dramatic results.